ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode. As a quick reminder, this is the episode on Season 1, Episode 5, Griffon the Brush-Off, which is the episode where we introduce Gilda, the Griffon, who is a brat. To summarize. Cancel that, I don't need my timer anymore. Now, one of the things that's pretty common with early episodes, especially basically all of Season 1, is that they're all message shows, which... yeah, okay. I mean, given the original intent of the series, it's not what you'd call surprising that a lot of these tend to be message-oriented. There we go. But I was counting as we went through this episode, and I came up with 6 separate messages for this episode, which is pretty impressive in my opinion. I don't mind. You know, it's good messages for the most part. It's just... yikes, you know? Are we live yet? Can someone confirm? Deny? Hello? Is anybody there? Hello? Hello? Okay, I think we're actually live. We might be live. We've been live for like a minute. Okay, we apparently are in fact here. Okay, good to know, good to know. Alright, so... it's also kind of funny looking at this stuff. I've talked many times about the difference between front-loaded storytelling and back-loaded storytelling. And just to reiterate that very quickly, front-loaded storytelling is when you have all of the general plot points and beats and storytelling laid out in advance. And so... then you cough. You ever get a cough when you have a headache? It's the best thing, because then the headache just gets all the more worse because you're coughing. Oh my goodness. I do have a pretty bad headache right now. Okay. So as I was saying, the hell was I saying? Message shows. There's a lot of message shows early on. And I'm okay with messages as long as they're decent messages. Or messages that I agree with. And I know that sounds pretty bad, but it's true when it comes to this kind of television. I don't mind as long as it's not, you know, the message is, I don't know, down with human rights, you know, I mean, it's something decent, right? I decided to go ahead and talk about the messages first because I thought this was amazing. So let's see, we've got, rather than being a dick in return to someone, you should be nice to them, treat them well. You know, rather than sinking to their level, try to, you know, cure them with kindness kind of a thing. That's message number 1. Message number 2. Don't let people walk all over you. Message number 3. Don't ignore a friend when they're trying to explain something to you. Sadly, this is going to be a message of another show later on, or another episode in this very season, so yay. Message number 4. It's okay to poke fun or to you know, to poke fun, to prank, to otherwise interact with people, as long as it is understood that it's an all good fun. Now, that's actually a very important point, because... hang on, Ethel, hear me out. Because if I was to prank Ethel, that would be bad, because Ethel's not into it. Ethel wouldn't be in on the joke, and therefore it wouldn't be in good fun. If I was to prank... I don't know, this water bottle here, that'd be okay, because the water bottle's down for it, and actually is in with the joke. They make a point of showing how most of the people she pranks are actually in on the joke, and therefore are enjoying it. Which also brings me to the next point. It's okay as long as you don't go too far with it. As long as you've got a line of acceptability that you don't cross. There's also the obvious message of don't be a self-centered bastard, which is just duh. And then finally, this is actually a kind of a neat one, I think. It's okay to try and be cool as long as you don't take it too far. Which is like the third message of moderation in this episode. Oh, I don't either, Aethel. If you tried to prank me, I'd slug you. And I hit very hard. But my friends know that. So they don't. You see the message here? The message is I'm dying. Carrots have killed me. This is the murder weapon. Okay. So that's the messages, which I'm actually down for all of those, really. But let's go ahead and talk about the episode proper. The proper line... No, I can't take a joke. Pete, my friends know you do not try to prank me. It will not go well. It's not a fun thing for anybody involved. Trust me. I do hit very hard. So yeah, as Aethel got there before I did. My first note is that this episode is a good showcasing of why these people are not actually friends yet. So obviously, Rainbow Dash doesn't even know Pinkie Pie is into pranks at all. The mere fact that she doesn't know that about someone she calls her friend is all I need to say about that. The next point is the fact that she constantly is trying to avoid Pinkie Pie right at the beginning. So, I mean, really, I don't actually have what else I need to say there. They're, excuse me, my throat's still giving me issues. They're not friends yet. I'm just more evidence, more brushstrokes that these people are not actually friends yet. Acquaintances, sure, but friends? Nah. We're not there yet. Now, there's also a pretty typical comedic riff, which I wanted to showcase. First of all, Dash is like, I gotta get away. And then Pinkie's like, boo, doo, 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 doo. And Pinkie always gets there first. Now, that's done for obvious comedic intent. This is why, that's what I was talking about. I was talking about front-loaded storytelling and back-loaded storytelling. Sorry, and then I got into a coughing fit. Front-loaded storytelling is when you plan out everything in advance. Now, this is the hardest thing to do when it comes to storytelling, but it has a lot of possibilities and potential when it comes to your story, because you can do foreshadowing. You can lay seeds and establish elements, and basically it's going to be a lot more awesome, especially on your second viewing, when it's like, oh, Backloaded storytelling is when you're kind of making it up as you go, but it's actually harder to do backloaded storytelling than it is to do front-loaded storytelling, because this is just a lot of time and work and effort. This requires skill on top of time, work, and effort. Because what you need to do is you need to look at the things you've already done that you weren't meaning anything with it, right? You weren't trying to establish a trend. You weren't trying to do world building. But then you have to do world building based on something you did just as an offhanded reference. My favorite example of backloaded storytelling is actually Deep Space Nine, which does it constantly. Like, just non-stop development. I mean, for those of you who are not aware, the Dominion was referenced as a casual aside thing in one random episode as a trade conglomerate. And when they were first developing the Gamma Quadrant, the whole point was that was just going to be one of the powers out there. They then took that idea and ran with it, and we got the Dominion out of it. In fact, the Dominion itself is a huge example of backloaded storytelling, because they hadn't even decided exactly what format it was going to take until like season 4 or 3, I forget which. But anyways, no, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Falconian. So, sorry, I know. The Borg are another good example of backloaded storytelling. But anyways, my point being, My Little Pony is definitely backloaded storytelling. Huge example of this. Gilda will actually come back in the future. Griffons will come back in the future. Pinkie Pie has already started to demonstrate abilities and traits as jokes that will actually become abilities and traits that she will demonstrate later on, like her super strength, super speed, which itself is also part of the thing that's going to help establishing the difference between Earth ponies, Pegasi, and unicorns. None of this was established in advance. None of this was developed in advance. Now, I don't want to say that they didn't have a series Bible because... oh god, what's her name? Faust. Miss Faust. She did have a lot of world building and backstory in mind when she first pitched this show. But then she left the show. So how much of this is deliberate and how much of it is changed is something that's very debatable. But speaking of which, Pinky's super speed is also kind of being referenced here. Oh yeah, they also do a decent bit of musical direction. And this is something that will also be an established trend for basically the entire rest of the series. They're going to start adding musical styles to each of the ponies. I actually don't know, Savacom. I am unaware of previous My Little Pony lore. So, make of that what you will. So they do a musical style for each person. Now, Pinkie Pie's is duh. I don't actually have a song to equate to it, but I did actually bother to bring up a song here, because this is basically Rainbow Dash's song. If you give it a second to see. Here, this. Not this part, but like they do that light guitar bit. Yeah, the surfer rock thing. And it's very much her tune, and that's going to be her tune going forward. Now, right now, it's still fairly basic. Let's go back to a real song. Right now, it's still very basic. It's basically just a riff off of the same tune. In future episodes, they will start taking this as a style rather than a song, and actually present, different musical approaches and musical direction, which can actually be really well done. One of my favorite examples of the music direction for them is actually Rarity. In a future episode where she talks about everything will just be bash, and it'll be brave and bold. And like every time she says the word brave and bold, there's this little musical flourish in the background as part of her theme. It's just nice little music direction like that. Right now it's still fairly basic, but at least they're trying. Anyways. Now, I just wanted to point this out because it amused me. Pinkie uses both centimeters and inches. So if she could do it... Anyways, all right, sorry. So, early on, the episode starts to establish one of its messages. So they prank Spike, right? And then Spike is like, ugh. And Pinkie's immediate reaction is, oh my god, are you hurt? Are you okay? That's important. Because again, not only is this a message show, but it helps to showcase Pinkie's mentality of, oh my god, I didn't want to actually hurt anyone. So, this then leads to them going through a series of pranks. There's a bit of a prank montage. And again, at each point, they bother to show that most of these people are cool with it. They're just a little bit of, okay. Like, alright, sure, very funny. This then leads to probably the most important scene in the entire episode, in my opinion. They've got this little prank set up on the river. And yeah, and then Fluttershy walks up, and she's like, whoa, wait, no. We can't. We cannot prank Fluttershy. Even our most harmless prank will harm her. That, again, establishes that message and that point I mentioned earlier. I know this is going to sound like a weird parallel, but that's the same basic equivalent to Aethel. Aethel is now Fluttershy. You don't prank Aethel because he's not in on the joke. It wouldn't be funny. It wouldn't be amusing. Now, I'm not saying you would be horribly scarred by whatever prank, but my point is that same mentality goes into that. This is not someone who should be pranked, so we don't. That's why I say I agree with the message there. Yeah, you only prank someone who's in on it. You only prank someone who's going to get it. I'm with that. But yeah, why did Spike keep trying to pick up the stupid thing? Each time he's like, hiccup. God, Spike, I know you're a baby, but use your head. Anyways. So, then we move on. Oh, absolutely, Savacom. I'm pretty sure Pinkie Pie has been looking for a prankster friend for a long time. And we know this is going to carry forward in the future. So, this then leads to the introduction of Gilda and Griffons. Now, Griffons will be introduced more properly, like, way later. I don't even remember how long from now we're going to actually have Griffons. But point being, Griffons are shown as a presence in the show. And I gotta admit, they actually look really cool. They do a good job with the visual design. And I'm all stuttery now. I went from coughing to stuttery. Gilda also does something, so I don't have a song equivalent for this, but I mean, I guess I could. So, there's that light surfer rock thing for Rainbow Dash. Well, for her, they do something closer to this for Gilda. And that kind of helps to establish the variance in tone immediately and musically as well. They also early do foreshadowing about it's like one of the first bits of foreshadowing. It's actually the second bit of foreshadowing. There's this bit where Rainbow Dash, you remember that chant we used to do? Okay, fine, we'll go ahead. I can't believe you recognize that, Sinnerstowing. Let's go ahead and do the chant. And Rainbow Dash is all enthusiastic, and she's just like, yeah, the chant is awesome. And Gilda's like, okay, I'll do the stupid chant. Very early foreshadowing for the variance between the two characters. We can see why the two are friends, or at least buddies, because they both have that whole pool factor, and they're both flyers, and they both, interact with each other when they're children. There's some pretty big differences here, right off the bat. This then leads to Pinkie and Gilda. Now, Pinkie Pie tried to interact with Rainbow Dash and Gilda. Now, let's go ahead and be real for a second. Pinkie Pie does come off a little too strong. She basically butts her head in each time. However, Gilda is outright rude in response. Just straight up mean. In fact, I actually wrote down some of the words she used as part of her dialogue, which include words like dork, dweeb, and generally being mean-spirited. This is fairly typical bully behavior, actually. And that's part of the problem. And it is shown in a very definitively negative light. You'll also notice the episode actually goes out of its way to make sure that Rainbow Dash is never actually aware or cognizant of how rude Gilda is being to Pinkie. That's important because towards the end there, we will see that she is completely not cool with that. Rainbow's more like innocently in on it. She's not actually aware of what's going on. That's all there is to that. So let's go and stop and talk about Gilda really quick. So again, backloaded storytelling. I'm pretty sure, yeah, no kidding, Suffolk. I'm pretty sure that Gilda and the Griffons were not designed when this episode was made. Not in any substantial work. If I'm wrong, by all means, correct me. But I would doubt it, especially given how long it will take before we actually follow through on this thread. However, with the advantage of hindsight and knowing what we know, I would say, yes, this is Gilda not only wearing a mask, but basically having no idea what she's doing. Given the fact that Griffons in general are all horrible people, by My Little Pony standards, it wouldn't surprise me that Gilda is actually one of the nicer members of that. And she just wanted to be, like with her friend again, the one and only pony that she actually got along with back in the day. And so she finally saves up to go and visit. And it's like, okay, hey! And then there's this, who's this Pinkie twitch? Just get out of my way. God, I'm just trying to hang out with my friend. And of course, so she comes across as too harsh and too severe because that's what she's used to. She doesn't actually know how to be a friend yet. That's something she's going to have to learn in the future. Because, yeah, exactly, because she grew up amongst the Griffons. So, that's my take on it. You'll also notice, and I know that this is absolutely not something that was planned out, but towards the end, when she's finally ousted, she's actually very stuttery and hesitant and can't even maintain her cool facade. She's obviously very seriously bothered by all this. Which I point out because that makes sense in the future. Anywho, so, there's this really nice line where Pinkie Pie says, I haven't actually met any other Griffons, but if I had, I bet they wouldn't be as mean. That line made me actually laugh out loud. And I've already said why. It's because Gilda's probably one of the nicest Griffons that we encounter in this show. I'd say probably the second nicest, not counting, I can't remember her name, the one who wanted her cutie mark. Because she's a rare case. But yeah, hilarious in hindsight, exactly. Now, this is probably one of the most important plot elements of the episode, in my opinion. Gabby, that was her name, Gabby. So Pinkie Pie is ranting to Twilight Sparkle, who is, of course, distractedly reading a book, very quickly, I might add. She almost reads at my level. And, I'm sorry, that sounds horrible. I don't even read that fast. But she mentions all her problems to Twilight Sparkle, and Twilight Sparkle says, yeah, it sounds to me like you're jealous. Now, we've seen the episode to date, so we know that that's not true. Gilda's mean, and Twilight Sparkle is wrong. But that's a good thing. This is actually, I know this is going to sound so strange, but I think this was done absolutely deliberately. This is to establish that Twilight Sparkle is smart, but not perfect. That she doesn't just get everything right. That she still makes mistakes and still says wrong things and blah, blah, blah. And frankly, that's the kind of thing that a main character kind of needs in just about everything. So I'm glad that they did that. Like, she completely misses the mark here, too. This isn't just her being wrong. This is her being way wrong. Like, she is way off base with this one. And yeah, you shouldn't jump to conclusions. Exactly right. I agree. Like I said, a lot of message in this episode. So, this then leads to Pinkie Pie going out and just being like, okay, well, now what do I do? Now, this is, what happens next is a good contrast to the other bit. So we saw all of the pranks earlier. Each of those pranks was very lighthearted, silly, and the other person was in on it, right? I made that point. The next thing we see, probably Echt, the next thing we see is Hilda's prank. So first she does the snake thing to Granny. Then she's completely rude to one of the ponies there. Then she steals an apple. And then she is a word. She's a dave, we'll say that. She is a dave to Fluttershy. Now, this is basically going for the nuclear option when it comes to MLP. By someone being mean to Fluttershy is pretty much, you know, shorthand for this is a mean person. But they do at least escalate up to that. And I point this out because this does help to showcase how completely different her mentality is. This, to once... Remember, they made a point of not pranking Fluttershy in a light and harmless way. Gilda is horrible to Fluttershy. Which, of course, serves as an immediate and direct contrast. Fluttershy-based ethics, yes. I mean, just ask Discord. This, to continue my parallel, would be like someone not only pranking Aethel, but like a really mean prank. Like really going out of their way to just be an absolutely mean-spirited person to Aethel, right? Completely unacceptable. And unlike Fluttershy, I will actually punch back, so don't do that, seriously. Probably Savicom. Yeah, this isn't even a prank. There's nothing even funny about it. She's just straight up rude to her. Like, what's funny, too, is the show makes a point of showcasing that Fluttershy is apologizing. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get in your way. What are you doing? Get out of my way. Oh, I'm sorry, I was just... And then she actually just roars full out in her face, making Fluttershy run off in tears. Yeah. So this then leads to Pinkie being like, okay, it's time to do something about it. Pinkie style. Zoom in on her face. I love watching these without adverts, by the way, because unlike some other shows I can mention, Star Trek, they do some good stuff with the commercial breaks. It zooms in on her with this super determined face, and then it zooms right back out after the commercial break, and she's at the party. But anyways. So this then leads to the party. Now, the party, I actually only have a couple of thoughts on the party. Possibly Savicom? I don't know. I have no doubt that if that was a Griffon to Griffon situation, well, let's just say Griffon Fluttershy would have been yelling right back. I have no idea if Gilda would have known Fluttershy. She might have, but given Fluttershy's shyness, especially when she was a kid, it wouldn't surprise me if she barely even remembered her and probably didn't interact with her at any significant level. So, the party. Now, of course, the party is, once again, this is our third and final showcasing of pranks. These are all still fairly harmless. Everyone involved is mostly like, ha ha ha, you know, just kind of laughing along with it. But it's actually kind of amusing to me. Yeah, it does kind of look like Pinkie's pulling the pranks, like she's trying to get back at her. And there's this constant push of that. Watching it with hindsight, it makes perfect sense, because this is, I mentioned, this is the big message of the show. Pinkie threw this party to cheer her up, to try and to make her, to kill her with kindness, you know? to try and be a nice person, and in so doing hope that she will engender niceness within her. Now, that doesn't always work, and this episode shows a fairly low level, but nevertheless exists an example of that. I can tell you from very real and personal experience that you can't always win someone over by being nice to them. It doesn't always work. But I do like how throughout the whole party, Gilda is still very rude, self-centered. I say I like this. She's very rude, she's very self-centered, it's all about her. She's still a very unpleasant person the whole time through. And that's kind of getting across what I just mentioned. She doesn't change her attitude. This is a whole party set just for her. And yeah, doesn't work at all. She's consistently awful. She also... she finally loses it completely. And this, with the advantage of hindsight, this scene is fascinating. Because at this moment, she's so pissed off because what's happening is, let's put herself in Gilda's mindset for a second. She's here trying to make a friend, or trying to reconnect with a friend. And there's this other person who is challenging her and poking her and provoking her and provoking her and provoking her. And damn it, this is stupid and you're dumb, you're Queen Lamo. I'm getting out of here. You're not going to let me take away my friend. Because that's what a Griffon would do. Because that's what she's used to. Because if Pinkie Pie was a Griffon, she would be doing all this to provoke her and just get revenge. Just straight up revenge, right? Now, with the advantage of hindsight and foresight, Hydrogen Whisperer, it makes perfect sense that this was just Pinkie being nice. Just trying to reach out. And she even says as much. No, I was just trying to help and turn your frown upside down. Because Pinkie loves smiles. We know that. She sings a whole song about it. And so she really loses it then, because now she's been ousted, and Rainbow is mad at her. So the one thing she was most afraid of, losing her one and only friend, has basically just been shoved in her face. And again, she probably could have recovered from this, and she eventually does. But you can really see how the Griffon mindset really pushes her out the door in a more or less literal way. Yeah. I will admit I feel bad for Gilda, but it'd be more accurate to say I feel bad for the Griffons in general. We'll talk about the Griffons more thoroughly when we get there in, like, a year. However long that's going to take. Like 2 years, I don't know, it's going to be a while. But they have a really messed up culture. I'm sorry, I hate to speak ill of another's culture, but whew. Yeah. It's also worth noting, by the way, that, as I mentioned earlier, the Griffon, she stutters and just has no idea how to deal with it. And Rainbow is firmly against her once she finds out what's really going on. So again, Rainbow is not cool with all this. She is like, no, you crossed the line. This is unacceptable. And I think that's actually all I got, really. Oh yeah, the dragons. Oh my god, the dragons. The dragons. Of course, in fairness, there's only really one dragon that's kind of horrible, whereas the Griffons are horrible mostly across the board. I can't even think of his name. Bully Dragon. He's like the typical, stereotypical teenager dragon. I can't think of his name, though. Even the dragon dad was alright. Is it Garble? I think you're right. I think Garble sounds right. I like to think that Gilda basically got worse after this because of the events of this episode. And then, yeah, and then Griffinstone happens. Hey, Theratos. That's actually all I got for today. So I'm going to chop off the local recording really quick.